different kind of person. Martin Cameron Dodo is one of the most celebrated journalists in the African continent. He's been at this job for almost 50, maybe more than 50 years as a journalist, and he has covered almost every event. Significantly, in terms of history of Ghana, he was there, right there, at the Polo Grounds when Dr. Nkrumah addressed a large crowd on the eve of independence. Cameron Dodo was there. He was also there when many things happened that he's going to tell us about today. He's written for the Times of London. He's written for many newspapers in London. But the significant thing is that this man is a prolific intellectual who taught himself everything. The only school he attended was basic school and middle school, became a pupil teacher, never attended any modern secondary school, never attended a modern university, but he rose up to the top echelons of journalism. He's a prolific writer, he is an astute reporter, and he's everything. He epitomizes what international journalism, local journalism, and any kind of journalism is. My guest in the studio is Martin Cameron Dodo, and we are coming live from location. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
It's a pleasure to see you. How old are you these days?
80. I was 80 in May.
You were 80 years old in May?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
What about family life? What has become of your children?
I have 6 children.
6 of them?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. One is a doctor, one is a lawyer, one is a financial advisor, one is a nurse, and other things.
I see. That's interesting. You had time to raise children to become lawyers and doctors and financial advisors.
Yes.
So what do you do these days?
I just keep writing and also doing research. Right now, my biggest project is the life of Professor Adom-Otchere, the historian. I'm going to be the historian of the historian.
Okay, so you're writing a book about Adom-Otchere?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Absolutely.
Beautiful, beautiful. We will thank you for that because we were complaining that people don't write. Recently, Professor George Bene of the University of Ghana published a book.
Yes, I've seen it.
A lot of information in that book,
yes.
You know, significant information.
Mr. VCRAC Crab has also published his autobiography.
Yes. Obeda Samoa has done so as well, Samoku Jeto and others.
That's
so
right.
It looks like gradually we're getting somewhere.
This is because the publishing industry in Ghana is picking up.
It's picking up, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You can get very well-bound books, very beautiful books. I was at the university bookshop just 3 days ago, and I spent a lot of money. The books are attractive.
At the University of Ghana bookshop?
Yes.
Yeah, it's been taken over by a private company.
That's right.
And they are making it work.
Yeah.
This week also in Ghana, but for the first time in a very long time, we are celebrating the date of 4th August. It is this week the 70th anniversary of the establishment of the United Gold Coast Convention, and it's the 120th anniversary of the establishment of the Aborigines Rights Protection Society.
Yes.
So these two organizations, set up 50 years apart, also began the conversations in one aspect in 1897 to halt the tide of land seizures by the colonial authority. And in 1947, to begin the real conversation towards self-government. Names come up immediately, Mr. Sayes, John Saba, Pa Grant, J.B. Dankwa, and others. And this week, for the first time, is being celebrated. Some controversy is expected anyway, because all through the 60th anniversary of Ghana, there has been a controversy about an outpouring of a different historical narrative from the beginning, from what we know. And you will be able to settle a lot of matters for us tonight in this interview. Today, the finance minister addressed Parliament on his budget, his mid-year budget. And in his concluding remarks, he reminded Ghanaians that the spirit of the UGCC, which is 70 years old this week, must be the spirit that guides leaders to do things not for themselves, but as Pa Grant said on the occasion, for posterity and also for Ghanaians yet unborn. So, a lot of history to be talked about tonight. Let's start, though, with the crucial event, the photograph that has gone around the world for the last 60 years of Dr. Nkrumah addressing a group of people at the Polo Grounds and indicating to them that at long last the battle has ended and Ghana is free forever. One thing he said which is significant is that what has happened will happen and it will be successful to show that after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. I've never heard of anyone who said I was there. So when you said to me that you were there, I was terribly excited. So how did you get there that evening? What time of the day was it?
I was then a junior reporter for a magazine called New Nation.
Local magazine?
Yes. I wasn't even assigned to the job of covering that night, but I was so curious. Remember that I lived in the bush.
Which bush?
Achimabuakwa.
Okay.
The only white man I saw was an agricultural officer during the cocoa rehabilitation campaign. The white man, an ASO, or agricultural officer, was there. And these people had come, we didn't know them, and they were deciding our fates as individuals and as peoples. And we were going to get rid of them. So I said, I am going to be there, whether I am assigned or not.
So for you, this event was the singular most important event that will help you and your contemporaries get rid of the white man, the agricultural extension officer.
And everybody who thought that we were not capable of holding such positions.
Okay.
That's it. If you deny me the opportunity to be trained to do the job, and then you turn around and say, you're not fit for the job. You know, it's a double injustice. And young as I was 20 years old, I understood this. And the fact that Africans were going to decide actually what they needed to do. And one of the sayings that is credited to Nkrumah is that we ought to manage or mismanage our own affairs.
Yeah, exactly.
And
we ought to be allowed to manage or mismanage our own affairs.
When you mismanage, you get punished. And he did get punished when he mismanaged. But at least he was punished by his own people.
Okay, let's go back to, so on that night,
Yes.
do you remember what day it was? 5th March, 1957?
No, not the dates, whether...
But it was not a weekend, it was a weekday.
A weekday, yes.
It was a weekday, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I got a press pass and went into Parliament House. And it was beautiful. The opposition were here, the government was there, and they all united in welcoming the new nation. And you could see that they had a sort of rapport. Now, this rapport didn't last. But if it had lasted, if what I saw in Parliament House on 5th March 1957 had continued, we would have been a far more stable country. We wouldn't have had the military interventions and all that sort of thing. But that's looking back.
Yeah.
I was very impressed at the eloquence and the enthusiasm with which they all welcomed the new nation. And after Nkrumah had spoken and Busia had replied and all that, they crossed the road. It was just about less than 100 yards to the polo ground. And there was this days. And because I had a press pass, I was able to, maneuver my way right up to where the leaders were standing. And Nkrumah had been very busy that day. He welcomed the Duchess of Kent. He'd spoken in Parliament, as I've already said. So when he got there and he saw the crowd, and I mean crowd, I think there must have been at least 1 million people there. All
Couldn't be a
around
million. But anyway, let's look at the dimensions.
Yeah.
So the crowd must have. So Polo Ground is today the office of the Commissioner for Human Rights and Administrative Justice.
Yes.
The old Parliament House.
Yes.
And that was Parliament House. And then across the street, it's now a double road.
Yes.
Is the Atta Mills High Street.
Yes.
Where they put some. It's a car park sort of.
Yes.
So that Polo Grounds of that night probably stretched from there all the way towards Bidin Power Hall.
Oh, the old community center.
Yes, to the right-hand side, all the way, almost to the prisons.
The post office.
And then to the left-hand side, they must have stretched all the way to what we call the Hearts of Folk Park.
Yes.
That's the kind of, that's how it was that night.
And it was.
Was it lighted?
Yes, there were floodlights, but only in front of Parliament and at the Polo Club.
Okay, okay.
Fantastic sight. I mean,
what was the crowd doing before Nkrumah and the group arrived there?
They were just trying to get close to the days. Okay. That's the trouble. Everybody wanted to be near the days, although the loudspeakers were going to relay the speech to everybody else, but they wanted to see. I mean, this was historic.
Yeah, it was.
Whatever you say, the first black country south of the Sahara to actually manage to get independence from an imperialist power. People understood it. Ghanaians are very, very politically conscious. And they understood it and they wanted to be there. And I think, in fact, it would not be an exaggeration to say that half the population of Accra was there. Because it was evening.
Did it make matters better that Nkrumah was speaking from his own constituency? You know, that area was his constituency. He was a member of parliament for what we call today Duodu. And so it must have made it better that he was speaking from his own constituency.
And he was dressed like he used to do at the Accra old arena.
He wore a smock that night.
Yes. And Bedema had PG, that is prison graduate cap. Botso had prison graduate cap. Kobadu said only those who had been in prison after struggling against the British were allowed on the days. And Bedema, Nkrumah, Kesleyford, Botso, and Kobadu they were there.
How did the event end? What time did it end?
Let me tell you what happened before the event ended. Because Nkrumah had been so busy, his voice had gone down a bit. When he saw the crowd, he got animated and he wanted to really reach them. He was a very good orator.
Yes.
Extremely good. So he told Kobadu, "Bepai mame," which means, come and say Chobo for me.
Oh, I see.
He didn't want to...
that is not in the footage of the BBC.
Of course not. I was
the
there,
part.
right there,
Okay.
4 or 5 feet away.
Okay.
And even if it had been recorded by foreign media, they wouldn't have understood what was going on. But he said, "Bepai mame," which means I'm reserving my voice for what is coming. So Kobadu said, got there, and you know, you've heard of him.
Yes, I
Very
have.
forceful personality. Joe boy! God, the reply. Yeah, Joe boy, yeah, Joe. Then he handed the mic to Nkrumah. And because of the Choboy, he just spoke in an extemporaneous manner. At long last, the struggle is ended. And Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever.
The battle has ended. And thus, Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever. From now on, there is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs.
Yeah. It was amazing. You know, the spirit.
Did you jump? Did you?
Oh, I don't even remember what I did. Meanwhile, the post office siren had been blasting out, you know, to let people know that a new dawn had arrived. And everybody was so enthusiastic. It was something else. I have never seen anything like that before. The only comparable event that moved me so much was the day that Nelson Mandela was installed as president of South Africa. Because again, I had never expected that my feet would even touch South African soil.
Were you there that day too?
Yes.
Or you were in Johannesburg?
Yes, right in front of the dais.
And it reminded you of 1957?
And I said, Nkrumah said, the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the whole African continent. This is the fulfillment of that statement, because nobody thought South Africa would ever...
This was in 1994?
Yes, May. Fantastic.
So how did eve of independence in Ghana end? How did the night end?
We just had to walk home. There were no buses.
Which home did you go to?
Me?
Yes.
I was living at Osu.
Okay, so that's a short journey.
I walked.
And there must have been a lot of people on the road.
Walking home, yes.
How did Osajefo depart the grounds?
I didn't watch.
You can't remember?
I can't remember.
Where did he go?
I'm sure they went somewhere to have a party.
A party?
Yeah.
Okay, but then the next morning was Independence Day.
Yes.
Where did the event occur?
Around the Ambassador Hotel area, the Duchess of Kent and others were there. Richard Nixon represented the United States of America. I went and shook his hand.
Oh, you did?
Yes. I loved history as a young man.
Yeah.
I went and shook Nixon's hand. I don't know what the
He was Vice President of the United States.
Yes.
And he represented the United States for the event.
I don't know what the Secret Service thought I was doing. I just went. Well, of course, I had my press badge.
Yeah. Did you get a photograph?
No. Well, who was to photograph me? I mean, nobody knew I was going to do that. I didn't know I was going to do that. It was impossible.
Did you report on that? Were you assigned to report on Independence Day?
That's what I was saying, that because I was a junior reporter, I wasn't assigned, but I went around all the places. I don't know whether I knew I was going to be a historical writer.
So the atmosphere then, with all the wealth descending on Ghana, the atmosphere then was that this was going to be a great country.
Yes, but I used to read a lot. And one of the papers I used to buy with my scanty pay was the Daily Telegraph.
UK's Daily Telegraph.
Yes.
Yeah.
On the day of Ghana's independence, they were the only paper that condemned the whole idea.
On what basis did they condemn the idea?
Well, you know, racism. Africans were not ready. The British were departing too early. That sort of sentiment.
Okay.
It was.
Let's backtrack a little bit to the UGCC,
yes,
which was formed on 4th of August, 1947.
Yes.
Dr. Dankwa writes that he proposed the date of 4th of August because he wanted to follow in the path of John Mensah Saba, who had set up the Aborigines Rights Protection Society on the 4th of August, 1897,
That's right,
to resist the obnoxious land bill. Was the nation aware of disagreements after Nkrumah had arrived about the United Gold Coast Convention? Did people in Chebi know about the United Gold Coast Convention?
Yes, they used to call it convention. And
that was a short name.
Yes, short.
So everyone called it convention.
Convention. And it was Dankwa who introduced Nkrumah to the Ghanaian public, because he was elderly and Nkrumah was young.
Was Dankwa already known to the Ghanaian public?
Oh, yes. When I was at Esiakwa and he visited there, women put their clothes on the ground for him to walk on. I saw this with my own eyes. You know how women dress? 2 pieces of cloth.
Yeah.
They took the one that was on top and put it on the ground for him to walk on. Oh, he was very popular.
In Esiakwa?
Yes. Well, at Chimabuakwa anyway. I didn't know anywhere else. So I tell you what I saw. And they called him Akuafo Kania, which means,
I see.
Yes, the light of the farmers, because he was fighting for a higher cocoa price for them and so on, to Africans to be allowed to buy cocoa instead of it being given to the UAC people. They exported all our goods and also imported all the goods. How can you corner a country's economy like that? And these people understood these things.
That's interesting. So Dankwa basically allowed Dr. Nkrumah to ride on his platform to be introduced to the Ghanaian people.
They were cooperating, you know, in a struggle against a major power, which Britain was at the time. You need everybody on board. You need young people who have the energy. You need old people who can reflect, and so on. So they never thought of rivalry at all. If you look at the list, you will see that rivalry wasn't in it. But Nkrumah had become a socialist while he was in the United States. And the ruthless analysis that he made on the basis of socialism was that these were bourgeois people who didn't really care for the ordinary person, and that eventually they would seek their own personal interest against the will of the people. Whether he was right or wrong, I don't know, but he made that analysis. So all the time that he was with them, he was resentful of how they treated them. Obechebi Lamte was the treasurer of the UGCC. He didn't like some of the items of expenditure that Nkrumah brought, and he actually suggested that he should be sacked as secretary and so on, but Dankwa and others settled the matter. There was a conflict between Nkrumah's personality and his ideas and what he saw. But Nkrumah's friend and guru, as it were, was George Padmore. George Padmore was a West Indian from Trinidad, and he'd been trained in America. But he then went to Moscow to organize a trade union for Africans. And he was sending a lot of communist literature to Africa. And Padmore had a very analytical brain. So he advised Nkrumah, look, take your time, watch them. They will make mistakes. If you are not with them, you can't seize the opportunity. But if you are with them and they make mistakes, then you can expose them and you will become the leader. So that's what happened. Nkrumah had a plan, and it was well conceived because of George Padmore's experience in political organization. And he executed it beautifully, formed the Convention People's Party after.
The Watson Commission and the Kusi Committee
Yes.
were important pillars
Yes.
and represented significant epochs in the march towards independence.
Yes.
The apologists of the view that independence had already really technically been achieved before even the formation of the UGCC hold the view that the Kusi Committee was the real deal. The committee set out to put up an independence constitution for Ghana, which occurred in 1950, and which had Henry Kusi and Dr. Dankwa as the prominent members of it, was really set up to sort of roll out into Ghana's independence. But the fact that Osajefo was not a member of the Kusi Committee may have contributed to his decision to hastily rebel and form a new political party because he felt that he had better chances of oratory and, as you say, maybe political organization. He himself said organization decides everything.
Yes.
You know, do you get the sense that Nkrumah's exclusion from the Kusi Committee may have occasioned the formation of the CPP?
It is possible, but the fact is that the Kusi Committee didn't propose universal adult suffrage. You cannot have a proper democracy and give qualifications to voters. If you don't earn £500 per annum, you can't vote. Or if you don't earn £1,000 per annum, you can't become a member of parliament. Those are qualifications that restrict democracy. And so Nkrumah called the constitution bogus and fraudulent because it was claiming to be bringing democracy, but it didn't include some of the essential elements of democracy. And then, of course, the British laws were still there, the law of sedition. A lot of people were imprisoned for just speaking their minds. That doesn't happen in the United Kingdom. And you claim that you are giving independence to a country, but people cannot speak their minds freely without being detained.
But that law of sedition remained on the books under Nkrumah's presidency, and a worse one was created, the Preventive Detention Act.
Yes.
Does that say to you that perhaps Osajefo became confused one way or the other? What happened to him? In your view, what happened to Nkrumah between 1951 and 1956? Why did he change so dramatically from the democratic mouthpiece of the ordinary man to the oppressor of the Ghanaian people?
Once you are in power, if you are an ambitious person, especially a politician, you want to maintain that power and keep it in your hands. And Nkrumah realized that if the opposition got a chance, they would, throw him away, and he didn't want that to happen to him. The Preventive Detention Act was not necessarily passed to stop violence from occurring in the country, because I had independence by 1957. the violence had died down. But he wanted to control the political system and also to give vent to the intolerance that was in the CPP. And everybody will tell you that it was very intolerant. They used to say, CPP up, United Party down, down, down to the gutter. That was their slogan.
That was a slogan.
Yes. So, you know, people say that it was because of the violence. No, there was also an intrinsic element of vengeance, dishonesty, and a whole lot of other things that...
Did Dr. Nkrumah succumb to Lord Acton's often quoted statements that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely?
Yes, and he was advised. You know, his constitutional advisor was a Briton, Geoffrey Bain, QC.
Yeah.
They told him, look, you can create a dictatorship legally. You can create a dictatorship legally.
By the law, like the PDA?
Yes. The law has been passed by the elected parliament of the country. And parliament can do anything apart from changing a man into a woman. And he followed this legally, gradually, until it came to a stage where if a judge gives a judgment that he doesn't like, he sacks him. You know, that happened to...
The famous Terry Adama trial.
Yes. President Akufo-Addo's father,
yes,
was one of the judges who were sacked. Sir Agu Kosa was sacked. Mr. Justice Van Leer was sacked for sitting on a case and deciding it as he had sworn to do.
As a judge?
As a judge. So, I mean...
When I come from the break, I'll be asking you also this about the Osajifo as we're trying to put some documents onto, some flesh onto the history of Ghana.
Yes.
That the political analysts say that he never really won any presidential election in Ghana at all, never occurred. So he won elections in 1951, it was a parliamentary election, and therefore he won his constituency. In 1954, the CPP was returned to power, another parliamentary election, therefore the Osajifo won his constituency. 1956, same. And then in 1960, he converted Ghana into a republic, and he did not submit himself to national presidential elections. The parliament was converted to a constitutive assembly. They drew a new constitution. The parliament was the electoral college that voted between he and Dankwa, not in a national election, presidential in the sense that we have. The first opportunity for that to have occurred was in 1964. And what happened? Ghana was turned into a one-party state. So I ask you whether you covering the event from ringside, as they say, whether you felt that the Osajifo was suspicious of his own popularity up from 1954, and he felt that if he submitted himself to a national presidential election, that he might not win that election. I'll come back after the break and then we'll talk about that. I'm sure you're enjoying the conversation. We'll be right back.
Marty and Benny have no idea how much destruction they cause. Nickelodeon brings you in on all of the crazy pranking fun with Toon Marty. Weekdays from July 3rd. Go TV. Live it, love it.
Thank you very much and welcome back onto the show. I'm sure that you are enjoying it thoroughly, and Mr. Cameron Duodu is an excellent encyclopedia of Africa and Ghana that we have here tonight. Thank you, sir, for staying with us. So back to the conversation that I initiated before the break.
Yes.
The Osajifo, he never really won a presidential election as we can see today, as Lehman won, as Rawlings won, as Kufuor won. as Mills, John Mahama, and now Nana Akufo-Addo have all won in mass presidential election, the American style. Even though he created an American-style constitution in 1960, in 1964, he didn't submit himself for that kind of election. Do you guess that perhaps he felt that he would lose an election if he submits himself to it? Never mind that he was the Osage for Dr. Kwame Nkrumah.
He didn't want to take the risk. As I've told you before, Nkrumah was a very careful man. He had what is called a structured approach to politics. He knew what he wanted and how to organize to get it. So he wouldn't take a chance. You know, it's possible that people might get angry and vote for Dankwa against him. No, don't take that chance. So you rig it up, as I say, by bringing people like Jeffrey Beng to craft legislation that looks democratic but allows you to put totalitarian measures in place. And he did that very, very well indeed.
So what effect did you know of the Preventive Detention Act by the time that it's grabbed Dr. Dankwa as well? What was the atmosphere in the nation when Dankwa, the colossus of free speech and democracy and originator of the independence thought, was now in prison? How did the nation react to that?
I was unfortunate enough to be the parliamentary reporter of Radio Ghana at the time.
GBC?
GBC.
In Parliament?
In Parliament. We used to have Today in Parliament. And I saw the deterioration. 1957 debates were beautiful. Joe Appiah, Victor Owusu, Kofi Baako, Gbedema, you know, they were equally matched. And you saw that, wow, this is my country. They are discussing my future. And they have different ideas, and they are listening to each other. Then the moment preventive detention came, not only were the opposition MPs silenced, because a lot of them were picked up, Posa, Dombo, and so on and so forth, but the CPP members themselves began to fear open speech. PKK Kwedu was a minister. He was detained. Mr. W.A. Wiafe, deputy minister, he was detained, and a few MPs. So, you know, the charade that he was building a United Nations was not on at all. You know, the point is, he wanted power. He didn't want opposition, and he was driving forward, pretending that because he was a socialist, and therefore speaking about what was good for the ordinary people, he was justified in everything that he did.
Did he remain a member of parliament in 58, 59, and 60, or Sergeant for himself? He must have remained a member of parliament.
Yes.
Did he speak in parliament after the PDA?
Yes, and he used to come and answer questions. We had prime minister's questions in parliament, as well as ministers'
Did his body language change? Did his oratorial skills lose the charm?
And he began to come less and less frequently. You know, he left things to Kofi Baako and others. And eventually, Gbedema himself, who had organized the CPP when Nkrumah was in prison, had to run away from Ghana because they were
Nkrumah's best friend?
Yes.
The finance minister?
Yes.
So when he ran away, so how did he run away? So you show up in parliament one day as a reporter and Gbedema didn't show up? And that's it.
He showed up. That's the whole point. He was cleverer than the security apparatus. He came to Parliament House, made a very fiery speech saying, I have seen the editorial in the Ghanaian Times. They want to put me on trial. Let them try. Very defiant. I know who wrote that editorial because I have worked with him for a long time. I know his style. It is Nkrumah himself who wrote that editorial. If he wants to arrest me, let him arrest me and try me and let us see. As soon as he made that speech, people thought, oh, that's the end of Gbedema. But he had made plans. He didn't sit in his own car to go home when he left Parliament House. He sat in Mark Kofi's car. Mark Kofi drove him straight to the border.
The Togo border?
Yes.
So straight from Parliament, Gbedema left?
Yes.
After he made that defiant speech?
This very day.
But he must have been a front bencher of the government party as finance minister.
He had been demoted progressively.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
He was no longer finance minister?
No.
Who became?
Minister of Health. Goka replaced him as finance
Reverend
minister.
Goka?
FDK Goka.
Okay.
Yes.
So Gbedema became Minister of Health?
Yes.
I see. By the time he was running away?
Yes.
So the next day, how did you find out that Mr. Gbedema had left the country?
Oh, we had. I think he was interviewed by an overseas news
So
outlet.
what happens? Do you have a by-election? What happened?
I can't even remember. I mean, this way.
So it was chaotic.
We didn't care anymore. You knew where the country was going. You knew they had the laws to make it possible. And the niceties about by-elections and so on and so forth. Gbedema has left the country. Kwamla Gbedema. What do you expect?
And there was no vice president in that arrangement, was there?
No.
Who was the Speaker of Parliament?
J.R. Asiedu was one. I think...
Quist was not there. He had gone.
Oh, Quist had long gone, yes. Quist was succeeded by Akiwumi, and Akiwumi by Asiedu. And so Parliament was just going like this. And for me, who had been sitting there reporting the speeches, comparing what it had become with what we knew before was one of the most tragic things I have ever seen.
So where was Buzia and Co? They had long gone.
Buzia was an MP and he left. He had to leave and he went abroad.
He ran away?
Yes.
Where was Victor Usu?
Victor was here. He was imprisoned.
Oh, he had been in prison?
He was.
So when you were an MP and they picked you up on PDA and imprisoned you, what happened to your seat?
I don't think...
Nothing happened?
No.
But that means the size of Parliament will shrink then?
Even if somebody was put there, you know, I mean, it was Parliament became a meaningless assembly, honestly. Because I say that the CPP elements themselves were afraid to speak out. Your minister...
What did Nkrumah occupy himself with in those days? Was he coming on television and on radio frequently?
Not frequently, but he did things like the Dawn broadcast.
Yeah, we know the Dawn broadcast.
Yes, and he gave declarations, you know. He was writing books, Consciencism, Africa Must Unite, traveling up and down Africa, telling people to fight against colonial oppression when he was colonizing Ghana.
So when this happened on the 24th of February 1966, let's have a look.
Newspaper headlines report the spectacular overthrow of Kwame Nkrumah, and jubilant crowds celebrate his downfall in the streets of Accra. The military coup in Ghana is the 7th successful revolt in Africa in 9 months. But none of the ousted governments have survived as long as Kwame Nkrumah.
So how did Ghanaians respond to that? Is it true that people came out to celebrate it?
Yes, look, Asha Fort was full of political prisoners. And, you know, the Ghanaian has a fair sense of justice. If you go to court, they say you did this, you did that, you did that. What do you have to say about it? You say, I did this, I didn't do that. I did this, I didn't do that. Your lawyer will speak, the prosecution will speak, and the judge will speak. If you are put in for 20 years, 45 years, nobody minds, because you've had your say. But to be imprisoned without trial, sometimes they are not even given particulars in depth about what you are supposed to have done. If you read Dr. Dankwa's letters from prison, he was asking, what have I done? I have an interest in building up the literature of this country, the legal system of this country. I am a member of the Ghana Academy of Sciences. Release me so that I can come and continue to contribute. And they kept him there until he died. So
people really went out to celebrate?
Yeah, Dankwa died in 65.
Yes.
Nkrumah fell in 66.
Yes.
People can't make the connection. But I think myself that that was the end of Nkrumah.
The death of Dankwa in prison.
Yes. And they couldn't hush it up. They tried very hard to get him buried quickly and all that. But people knew Dankwa. You know, and the farmers may not have the guns, but their children are in the army. Everywhere, where did he spring up from? Kotoka and so on. You know, so you give people the incentive to condemn you, and then they come.
Was it too frightening to mourn Dankwa when he died?
There were people who actually went to Kibi and carried his coffin. One of them was Thomas Mensah. He used to be a law lecturer.
Yes, he stayed in South Africa for a bit for
That's right.
as Ghana's High Commissioner.
That's
Yes,
right,
I know him well.
Thomas was photographed by my photographer, Drum Magazine, holding the coffin. And he said he didn't care. Let them come and catch me. And Duodu was also there. Pa Willie, a whole lot of people.
Was it a big funeral in Ichebe?
Yes.
And people were not afraid to attend?
No. And I took a photographer there and we photographed the whole damn thing.
You reported it?
Yes.
You were there?
Yes. And
the government sent delegation?
Government delegation, security people. We knew them. We could spot them. Nobody cared. Listen, nobody cared. We were no longer afraid. I took a drum photographer who was known to the security people, and he was taking pictures of people.
Where is your photographer today?
Oh, unfortunately, he's passed away.
He's passed.
Yeah. He knew the people. He took photographs of them. They knew him. Nobody objected. Say, oh, don't take a photograph of me. And when we published these pictures...
So no Minister of State attended?
No.
Nkrumah didn't write anything to the family?
No. Oh, they even instructed the priest to finish the church service, the funeral service, at a specific time. I think it was 3 o'clock or something like that. Yes. Listen, these people were callous. You know, those who read books and think that the CPP regime was great and so on because, of course, it was doing great things for the African continent in terms of supporting the colonial struggle in Tanzania, in Kenya, everywhere else. In Ghana, they were callous.
Why did that, if you like, callousness of Nkrumah affect also the disregard for the infrastructure development that he laid for Ghana? The motorway, the cooperatives, the state-owned companies, all of that was washed away when he was overthrown. And any economic analysis will tell you that that was wrong. Why did hatred for Nkrumah, you know, permeate the society so much that the leaders of the coup decided to cancel everything in Nkrumah?
I'm glad you used the word hatred. It's an emotion. An emotion ruling a human being leads to ruin. You know that when you get angry, you can do things which, when you look back on, you say, God, did I do that? That is precisely what happened to the whole nation. The nation got mad because of the sheer release that it felt. It wasn't the fact that people were detained that was so wrong, but the fear that the existence of that system put into people. Because fear is also an irrational thing. It may not even have any basis in fact, but psychosis is a disease like any other disease. And people were afraid, people hated the system, and they had a release when it went up without nobody's sat down to
Nkrumah wrote later on, and the CIA declassified documents also suggested that the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States may have been interested in having the Osajefo out of power because they feared that his vision about Africa's development was going to make Africa greater than America. You were writing in those days.
Yes.
What was the connection of the CIA? Well, the CIA have already said now that, yes, they were part of it. But
The CIA is instrumental in effecting change in every country which America wants to control. Nkrumah could not be controlled by America. Today he's in Moscow, tomorrow he's in Beijing.
So should we be glad that the CIA occasioned change in our country?
I'm going to tell you something that you will not like to hear. Mm-hmm. If you are stupid enough to create the conditions which a foreign power can use to overthrow you in your own country, using your own countrymen, then I'm afraid I have no sympathy for you.
That's deep.
If you don't create conditions, they can't be exploited. The CIA didn't fire one shot in Accra on 24th February 1966.
Those Ghanaians who fired the shots?
Yes. Why did they fire the shots? Because of what was in their minds and what they felt against the regime.
Was there a sense of euphoria after Nkrumah had been overthrown? Did that sense of euphoria portend hope for Ghanaians, the same kind of hope that you felt on Independence Eve?
No, because,
So was it sadness? Was it disappointment?
The people were happy that those who were suffering were not going to suffer any longer. But that is not like, I am free, I'm going to get a department, or I'm going to get a job, and I can help to build my country. No, it was a
Was corruption part of the national narrative at the time?
Yes.
Corruption. Today, corruption is very high on the agenda.
Well, in those days,
it was.
Yes, but
was it despotism or corruption? Which one?
Both. But Nkrumah was clever enough to isolate a few corrupt people in his own party and jail them. F.Y. Asari was jailed. H.K. Jabba was jailed for
corruption.
Yes, they went to Germany and bought cocoa spraying machines, insecticide spraying machines, and sold them at a profit to the cocoa farmers. And of course, they got invoicing and they got some money.
So that Nkrumah was cracking the whip?
He could. And he also seized some people's houses. Kubeduse lost his Asante house. Other people were told, you have 2 houses, the state will take one, you take one, so on and so forth. He was a man who knew how to organize things and make it look as if he's doing something.
Why did we go after that from the 1969 election and then from there to a coup d'etat, to a coup d'etat, to election, to coup d'etat, to election, to coup d'etat? By then, I'm sure you were heading out to London where you continued your journalism work with important newspapers like The Times. When you sat in London in the mid-1970s and you look back on Ghana, what did you envisage?
I knew that we had lost an opportunity. People imitate things. The conditions in 1972 that overthrew the Progress Party government were nothing like the conditions that existed in Ghana in 1965. And yet, because there had been a coup and people knew how to use the army to attain power, they used the army to attain power. And the people who came to rule at that time were probably worse than those who ruled in 1966. People imitate, and in the course of imitating, they can exaggerate the ills that they claim to have come to solve. And because they are human beings, greed, flattery, and other things come into the mix. And when you have a situation like that, you don't have stability because people will always be jealous of power. People will always attribute the sudden gaining of wealth in the society to corruption. And once they get angry about corruption, stability is out of the door.
So, when did you get excited about Ghana again?
Well, I temper my enthusiasm now because, of course, experience has shown me that things start well and they can get bad, and they can even get very, very bad. But I am excited right now because the country sank to a situation where I have never in my life expected that it would sink to. For Ghanaians to take machines into rivers and turn the rivers upside down in search of gold, knowing that the rivers are the source of water for their own people. What kind of stupidity is that?
You're worried about Galamsey?
Yes. I can't believe that Ghanaians did it.
It's a livelihood for people.
Yes. So, a livelihood. You can go and stand on the roadside, rape women, and take their clothes to go and sell in the market, and you will make a living. Is that what we want? Livelihood is a relative term. That is why there are laws. People will do things if you allow them.
So what is giving you hope?
Well, the government this very week that we are talking has sent the troops in to try and stop it. But having stopped it is just one aspect of it. All these craters that you see, the rivers, how to refloat them, how to make sure that their sources are not dry, the forests that have been cut, the farms that have been ruined. I come from the forest, as you know. My father's farm, where we used to go and take cocoyam, cassava, plantain, it has been ruined. You can't even walk there because you fall into a hole and die. And this is all over the country. Even if you are going to earn a living, look, our people were digging for gold years ago. That's why this country became known as the Gold Coast. But they used methods. They dug a hole, not wider than 3 feet in diameter, and they went there and then dug like, underground. And they got gold, and you can see the gold. Our chiefs have it implanted, they sold it, and we became the Gold Coast.
When you worked in the newsrooms of the international newspapers, like the Times in London, in the 1970s, did they make a mockery of Ghana in Africa? Your colleagues, the British reporters?
They make sarcastic remarks, what do you expect? Idi Amin in Uganda, or Dr. Banda accidentalizing people in Malawi, and so on and so forth. Because, with the greatest respect, some people enjoy putting others down. And if you give them the means, they will use it against you.
Let's look at another international event, the Nigerian Civil War. Some people call it the Biafran War. It's been celebrated around the world over the last few months or so. Celebrations in London that I observed, the BBC and ITV and all of that, talked about the Civil War. And young Nigerians who were born at that time or born after then have been pontificating about it. One aspect that I noticed was missing, even in the BBC's coverage, was the role of Ghana and Ebiri. Because the Civil War started in Nigeria in 1967 or so, and the Achampon government had brought them to Ebiri for a peace. The Ankara government brought them to Ebiri for a peace accord. That has not been recorded in the history, it appears. For a Ghanaian reporter, are you worried, as I am, that the Ebiri Accord has found no place in the history of Biafra?
Oh, it is there in the more serious discussions, because that was the first time, the first and only time that all the governors of Nigeria came together. And the Biafran War was a worry to all Africans because the elements are common everywhere. Tribalism, corruption, inefficiency, the lot, things that get people dissatisfied with their political system. It's common to all African countries. So Ankara and others, even though they thought that the OAU frowned upon interference in the internal affairs of other people. They brought them together. Ankara was in the chair, actually, and every now and then he would leave them to thrash things out. You killed so-and-so, you killed so-and-so, I killed so-and-so because of you did this. You know.
This during the conference?
Yes. But when they left, the civil servants and civilian advisors of General Gowon thought that Ojukwu had got the better of him.
At the conference?
At the conference. So the agreement that they reached at Eburi was never implemented. I saw Ojukwu at Accra Airport just before he went into his plane, and I asked him, how about it? Do you think this agreement will work? And he said, as for agreements, we've been reaching them all the time. It's the implementation. And truly, when he went back to the East, the agreement was not implemented. They began to, dilute certain aspects of it that did not favor the federal side, whereas it had all been agreed as a compromise. You compromise, you give something, somebody else gives something, but you go back and they say, we compromised too much, they didn't compromise enough. You don't reach international agreements that way. So when they went back and did this, then Ojukwu said, oh, okay, I've come to Accra, Aburi, we've agreed, and you say you don't want to implement it. All right, now we declare independence for Biafra.
And they went back to full-scale war.
Full-scale war with consequences you can't believe. If you see the pictures of starving people and the sheer venom with which the war was carried out. Can you imagine bombing villages from the air and all that sort of thing?
It was terrible. Let's talk again about another aspect of Africa, and it's also historical these days, but it's the Arab Spring that began in Tunisia with the concern of graduate unemployment expressed by Mohamed Bouazizi. It then transferred into Egypt in a way that toppled the almighty Hosni Mubarak. But the biggest cost of the Arab Spring appears to be the brutal murder of Colonel Gaddafi in Libya. We are now, 4 or 5 years away from the Arab Spring, and we are writing the story on Egypt after Mubarak and Libya after Gaddafi. What do you make of that?
Well, as I have said before, emotional politics always leads to danger. Gaddafi was hated by some people, others liked him. But those who hated him got the upper hand and they brutalized him and killed him. Now we can see that those who use the hatred of his opponents to try and topple him have washed their hands of Libya. Libya is in total chaos. Africans there are not safe. Ghanaians are being deported every now and then. Some of them have to take those perilous journeys across the Mediterranean into Europe. All over the place. Libya of today could not have been imagined by anybody, even the worst enemy of Gaddafi at the time. But this is what happens when emotional politics get into the way. And again, I blame the leadership. Gaddafi should not have created the conditions that could have been used to overthrow him. His sons were wild during the struggle. Instead of trying to sit down and analyze what could be done, what could be retrieved. You know, if you tell people that you are going to kill them like cockroaches, are they going to sit down and wait for you to come? They will look for allies, and allies are always easy to find, especially in a country with petroleum resources. We should never forget the economic argument. It happened in Biafra as well. Certain powers that needed or wanted control of Nigeria's petroleum were selling arms to the federal government so that it could conquer the East and reintegrate, especially the Midwest, into the petroleum production system.
Just before we end up, let's talk about South Africa as well. After Mandela, it's almost like it's sitting on the time bomb. There's the creation of the new Julius Malema, who's been a thorn in the flesh of the African National Congress. Jacob Zuma is being cited for one corrupt activity after the other. Cyril Ramaphosa is no longer trusted by the trade unions. And, well, South Africa is almost heading for a precipice in terms of its leadership. What do you foresee will happen in South Africa?
I can only tell you what I hope. And my hope is that the ANC will cleanse itself and get elect a leader who is not corrupt. Because it is just too much. And it's so absolutely sad. Mandela spent 27 years in prison to create this, to allow a man like Zuma to use state funds to build himself houses, to bring in foreigners who have come to pillage South Africa by taking all the lucrative contracts and so on. We have heard about the Guptas. You know, it is sad. Maybe it needed to happen because that story was too glorious. It just was too glorious. And this needed to happen. For the youth, it's an eye-opener. They know what is beautiful and what is ugly. They've been blessed to see, like we did before. Some of us saw the good part of Ghana, and some of us also saw the bad part of Ghana. In South Africa, I'm sure that the youth, and you mentioned Malema. Malema is an extreme part of the change that is coming, of how the youth want things to happen. Probably somebody less extreme than him will come, but with the same sort of ideas. We want clean government, we want to provide the people with water and food and housing, the things that matter to them, so that when we talk about the struggle to free South Africa, it's not just political freedom, going to parliament and shouting, but getting
real economic freedom.
And the health of the people, education, taking care of the people. That is what the whole political system in Africa has been lacking. Taking care of the people has not occurred as much as taking care of the leadership. And if you do that, you create a gulf that will turn around to...
Where do you anticipate Ghana would be over the next 20 years?
If Akufo-Addo's foundation, and it's only a foundation, is built upon, if his cabinet supporting, if we get rid of this Galamsey mess, and we begin to have a national purpose. Now, the thing about Galamsey that worries me most is this, not the actual physical destruction alone, but the attitude that a Ghanaian, having been brought up in the forest, who knows the use of water, the use of food farms, can actually go and take a Chinese machine and turn the water into poison, use mercury and cyanide to kill the fish in the rivers. A Ghanaian. We used to think of ourselves as people who had brains, but we have demonstrated that we are complete and utter fools, and that is very dangerous. How did we come to this pass?
So 20 years from now, how would you see Ghana?
If we can solve this problem, and if we popularize the ideas that enabled it to be solved, then we have a hope. But other than that, I'm afraid we are just marching to nowhere. It is so bloody stupid. I can't believe that Ghanaians could do it, but they've done it.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron Duodu, and happy 4th August. Thank you. Thanks for watching, and good night.